Big week for aviation this week with the resumption of non-essential travel to the US. The pandemic, as we know, has had a huge impact on the sector. There is going to be a recovery, but will that recovery include corporate travel? Joining me now for more on this is Eoghan Corry.
Good morning, Gavin.
How important is corporate travel for the sector versus leisure if we go back to pre-COVID?
Vital. A lot of the transatlantic services will really depend on the front of the aircraft. That makes the route viable. The stuff that goes on in the back really is for airlines like British Airways is a bit of an afterthought. They can put in leisure when they've got a very strong corporate offering, and we've seen that it was traditionally what kept British Airways flying transatlantic. It's a very big dominant carrier in the transatlantic market from the European side. Aer Lingus had, for historic reasons, there wasn't the same amount of money in the country, difficulty getting a viable business class product, but that changed massively in the last 15 years or so.
I think it's fair to say since things have started to get back to normal, the corporate end of the market is recovering more slowly than the leisure end.
Everything is showing that the corporate is slower. I mean, we've the IATA barometer that came up last month, World Travel Market, where I was last week. Everybody talking leisure will be first back, corporate will be slower. A very thin majority of the CEOs of world airlines said that they did expect yields to come back in 2022, but it was only 52.48. That's the sort of uncertainty they have that vital corporate end of the market is going to recover by the end of next year even.
Well, I think they got a big problem on. I mean, I want to put the following to you. Some corporate travel cannot be morally justified now that Zoom, etc., is a normal way of doing business. I mean, maybe if you're buying a factory in San Francisco, you need to go for a look. But you don't need to travel to San Francisco for a conference, for example.
It's a huge one, and the week that's in it with COP26 in Glasgow, where I was last weekend, the corporates will, whatever about the feeling within a corporate boardroom, and particularly climate activists would be very sceptical about the reaction of big business. But certainly the optics are that you can't be flying people around needlessly. Now, interestingly enough, Gavin, we saw that before global financial recession changed the old corporate travel as we saw it. What the airlines did then was did a lot more in the intermediate class, which is not really the back of the plane in economy with 32 inches of seat room, and it's not at the front, which is grossly overpriced. When you compare rails first class versus economy, aviation is much higher. They have an intermediate class. That was the response to the global financial recession. I'm not sure they have an armory of responses, but there certainly is a strong feeling among the business community that travelling by economy doesn't fit you out for meetings.
I think, Eoghan, if we don't see the return of corporate travel in the same way, it is a further incentive for aviation to do a bit more on sustainability and get there quicker. What's the answer, do you think? Is it hydrogen aircraft? Is it electric ones? Is it alternative fuel or what?
It's certainly alternative fuel, biofuel, all of that has been getting a lot of air. But, the people who spend a lot of time in that area say that the impact of producing the biofuel is worse than the savings that will be generated by it. So it certainly is more fuel efficient aircraft. And that's happening. The aviation industry is, trumpeting, because they're a very strongly lobbying airline, that aviation, the heavy burners like the old classic 747. I remember going to the St. Patrick's Day Parade to see Aer Lingus' first 747, the big A380. All of those have been banished from the skies by COVID. So the big fuel guzzlers, nearly, fewer of them up there. The more efficient Boeing 737 Dreamliner, the A321neo that Aer Lingus has taken delivery of and is going to be using 8 of them in the transatlantic services next summer. They're more fuel efficient. But there's no shortcut here. Aviation is going to be in the heart of that fuel emissions debate as long as fossil fuels are at the core of our business world.
We leave there, Eoghan. Thank you.
Always a great pleasure, Gavin.